Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for this exciting conversation with Carmen Papalia and Amanda Cachia. I'm Maxine Proctor. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a white woman with long blonde and light brown hair. I'm wearing glasses and a black top and I'm sitting in my kitchen table in front of a white wall. I'm the managing editor of BlackFlash magazine, and I'm joining you tonight from beautiful sunny Saskatoon, which is situated on Treaty 6 land. I would like to pay my deep gratitude to the land on which I reside and the water that supports us all. I invite you to consider and honor the land you are currently on. I would like to pay respect to the numerous First Nations, including Cree, Dene, Plains Cree, Nakota, Saulteaux, Ojibwe, and the Métis Nation, whose traditional homeland we gather on today. I ask that you take a moment to reflect and honor the histories and treaties of this land and the land you currently occupy. Tonight, Carmen and Amanda will be discussing the upcoming BlackFlash Issue, a temporary collectively held space, which was guest edited by Carmen, as well as the exhibition Provisional Structures, Carmen Papalia, with Vovo and Jess Sash, which was curated by Nicole Nugent and is currently installed at the Mackenzie Art Gallery. BlackFlash magazine has been produced and published in Saskatoon for 38 years and is dedicated to presenting critical ideas and urgent issues about divergent artistic practices. For a number of years, Nicole and I have discussed ways for BlackFlash and the Mackenzie to partner and share resources, so I'm so thrilled to see this project come to fruition. The issue includes a thoughtful collection of writing and reflections by Aislinn Thomas, Vovo, Slater, Vanessa Dion-Fletcher, Joselia Hughes, Lisa Prentice, Cecily Nicholson, and Mercedes Eng. I'm incredibly grateful to Carmen, Nicole, and all the contributors for their patience, kindness, and generosity. I've learned and hopefully unlearned so many things from this process. You can pre-order the issue, a temporary collectively held space, on the BlackFlash website today. Thank you again for joining us tonight. There will be a Q&A at the end of the conversation, but please feel free to submit questions in the chat anytime. Now I would like to pass the mic along to Nicole, who is the Curator of Education at the Mackenzie Art Gallery, to introduce Amanda and Carmen and say a few words about Carmen's recent work with the Mackenzie. Thank you.
Hello, Nicole here. Thank you so much, Maxine. It's been such a pleasure partnering with and learning alongside you and your team at BlackFlash. And it has been a long time that we've been working together and thinking through ways to examine the work that we're both doing and continue to grow as institutions. I'm really grateful to have had you as a collaborator, Maxine. And again, my name's Nicole Nugent. I'd use the pronouns she and her. And if I would describe myself as a fair-skinned, middle-aged woman with blonde, curly, short bobbed hair. I'm wearing a pair of cream blobby earrings that my friend Carrie made, and a blush pink top. And I'm in my dining room. Behind me is a quilt that my friend artist Martha Cole created. And it brings me a lot of warmth and comfort. I'm very excited to be where I am right now. And I'm so excited to be in this space with you all. So I'm curator of the Provisional Structures project. And I'm really excited to give you a little bit of information about the entire project. It's an exhibition, public and education program, and also includes the development and launch of an accessibility statement for the Mackenzie Art Gallery. And you can find that statement on the wall the minute you walk into the gallery, which is located in Regina, Saskatchewan. And you can also read it on the Mackenzie's website. It was just over 4 years ago that I had the opportunity to first hear Carmen Papalia speak about his tenets of open access. I was at an art education conference at the Vancouver Art Gallery. And it was really quickly after that that our mutual colleague, David Garneau, had invited Carmen to visit Regina and had reached out to me and said, hey, this amazing human is coming to Regina. Have you ever heard of him? Do you want to work with him? And I was like, I definitely do. And so Carmen visited the gallery, and he conducted an eyes closed tour of one of our feature exhibitions for a small group of participants. And it was literally that night that a sense of, I would use the words radical transformation began within my own practice as a museum educator. I started to ask questions about ideas that I had long accepted and taken for granted, questioning the very core of how I understood engagement and the relationships that I have and we have with artists, communities, and each other. The ways in which my practice had privileged ableist experience began to show themselves and demand to be attended to. And since that initial visit, Carmen has visited Regina and the Mackenzie every year. And he's been working with our staff and our community, expanding on his work with open access, challenging our institution to consider accessibility, agency, and care as central to our relationships and to the work that we do at the gallery. Provisional Structures is an exhibition that presents us with an opportunity to embody ideas of access and interdependence, the ways that we care for each other and consider access and agency in public spaces as well. I'd like to share a visual description of the exhibition with you all. I wish we were together, gathered in the center of the space, but I'm going to do a visual description to help transport us. A scaffolded ramp occupies the majority of the gallery's largest exhibition space, winding in a spiral shape towards the ceiling. You're asked to move up a wooden ramp supported by steel scaffolding and experience the shape with your body. From the ceiling hangs a sound-reducing felt-lined dome that appears to be floating over top of the entire structure. Under the ascending ramp is a hallway, and a red string connects you from didactic panels to the right of the entrance and leads you into the center of the structure. Upon arriving at the center of the installation, you'll find yourself surrounded by 11 freestanding mirrored columns. In the center of the columns, just under 200 sandbags are assembled into curved benches for you to rest and gather, each printed with the words open access. While seated on the sandbag benches, you can listen to an audio piece about trauma-informed care in communities by artist Vovo. And this recording was a keynote presentation that Vo gave for the Portland Disability Justice Collective online conference in 2020. The space is lit fairly dramatically with cool fluorescent lighting around the outer edges of the gallery ceiling, and then it's dimmed closer to the center of the sound dome. And running up the wall inside the left of the gallery entrance is an artwork by artist Jess Sash titled "Take All the Time You Need." Over 1,300 small brass plated metal plaques, each reading "I need a minute," are installed in columns 10 feet high and 5 feet wide, resembling a donor wall. There is an old warm wooden bench in front of the piece, a place to sit and consider accessibility as a long, unending process, one in which the time required is expressed by the person who needs support. And that is the exhibition. And I hope to see you all there. And I'm very excited to have the opportunity to introduce Carmen and Amanda. I first met Dr. Amanda Cachia when she began her work at the Dunlop Art Gallery here in Regina. it's been quite a few years since then, but I was immediately inspired by her curatorial work and her ideas around art engagement and education in galleries. Now Amanda works as an independent curator, and she's from Sydney, Australia. Her research focuses on modern and contemporary art, curatorial studies and activism, exhibition design and access, decolonizing the museum, and the politics of embodied disability language in visual culture. I cannot wait to read these. She's currently working on 2 book projects, a monograph based on her dissertation called Disability Art Agency, Participation and the Revision of the Senses, and the edited volume, Curating Access, Disability Art Activism and Creative Accommodation. Welcome, Amanda. And now I'll introduce Carmen Papalia. I'm very pleased to introduce Carmen as a collaborator and also as a friend. And words fall short when I think about how to describe our process of working together and what it's meant to my professional practice and to me personally. Carmen exudes a spirit of an open spirit of curiosity and collaboration, while at the same time, he stands firm in his commitment to accessibility through his practice. He is an educator, a learner, a collaborator, a supporter, a caregiver, an innovator, and a creator. He's received many awards, and his work has been featured at the Museum of Modern Art, at the Guggenheim Museum, Tate Liverpool, the Whitney Museum of American Art, the Banff Center for Arts and Creativity, Gallery Gachet, and many others. And I'm so grateful to have this opportunity to hear from Carmen and Amanda. And I'll now pass the mic over to both of you. Thank you so much. Check.
Well, hello, everyone. Carmen, do you want to go first or should I?
Yeah, I could go first. Thank you so much, Nicole. I was like just I didn't want to hear too much more about myself, but thank you for that lovely introduction. I'm here in my corner of my bedroom. I'll just say I use he, him, his pronouns. I am zooming in from the stolen lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. I'll give a visual description. I have olive skin and black hair. I have a beard right now. I am wearing a orangey brick colored button shirt with black buttons and 2 pockets on each side. Yeah, my sleeves are kind of rolled up a couple times. And I'm wearing olive colored pants. And I have a leather flat cap that's brown on, and over the ear headphones over that. And you might be able to see part of my hat collection in the background. And that's me. Check.
Okay, I want to do my land acknowledgement. I want to acknowledge that I live in Oceanside, California, which is the traditional territory of the Liseño people of the La Jolla, Pala, Palma, Pachanga, Rincon, and Saboba bands. My pronouns are she, her. And my visual description, I'm a white woman with brown curly hair. It's tied up on top of my head today. I'm wearing black framed rimmed glasses, and I have brown eyes. I'm wearing a t-shirt that is purple and pink tie-dye, sitting in my bedroom because it's quiet up here without my 2.5-year-old, although you may hear her at some stage. And behind me is a window that is closed with white shutters. And to one side of me is my tree, which I find to be very relaxing. And there's a white pillow behind me on my chair as well. So Carmen, how should we begin? Do you have anything you'd like to to start off with. Like, well, first I want to start off by congratulating you on yet another amazing project. And it's kind of more meaningful to me, given that it's in Regina, which is where I feel like I cut my teeth as a curator and a gallery director. And I so enjoyed my time there, by the way. It was a wonderful experience. And I'm still sad that I left, actually, to this day. So I'm really, really, really happy that the Mackenzie Art Gallery have brought you on board, because you're one of the best and one of my favorite artists. So tell me what it's meant to you to have this project and to also collaborate with Maxine at BlackFlash, and how you think that this entire project fits into your trajectory as an artist.
Yeah, I want to thank Maxine also and BlackFlash for just this opportunity. And yeah, it did come out of my work with the Mackenzie over the last few years, this opportunity to edit this issue. And I think my collaboration with the Mackenzie has been just one of the more like kind of ideal experiences, and being called in to like work with an institution around accessibility, since like my kind of approach to accessibility and just the way I understand it is more of like it's an ongoing process. It's something that is, requires like you to have ongoing relationships with communities, and it's not this checklist isn't insufficient. It's more about the responding to the needs in the room at any given time, questioning who's in the room and who's not, and what the social, cultural, and political conditions are that are either supporting people to have agency or alienating them. So the Mackenzie was just this, working with Nicole, especially, and through David and David's introduction, I think it was just this great opportunity to not just like, jump in and work with like, staff, maybe for a couple of days and then leave. Like I never liked those opportunities, really, because it doesn't really allow us to get into the conversation and really consider these practices of accessibility deeply. And I think in general, a lot of institutions, since they are colonial institutions with like sort of ableist assumptions at their root, they need to kind of go through a fair bit of unlearning when it comes to like these biases and barriers of ableism. So yeah, like I guess, over the last few years, we've really been building on this conversation about accessibility, leading to the launch of this show, as well as the accessibility statement that Nicole mentioned, and really, and then with this issue as well, as I think it was an effort to like extend some of those conversations and really just like bring in a group of friends that I thought could help me define what accessibility beyond an accommodation is, and I think that's very much the spirit of the group that is pulled together in this issue. Who are each approaching accessibility and just this topic from each of their positions. Some of which like are longtime friends that I met even before I really started thinking of myself as an artist, and became kind of even connected to disability community. So I think it's I used to actually in college I graduated, I did my undergrad at Simon Fraser University in Vancouver, and I started a magazine actually with my college friends at the time, and we just did it as a way to kind of publish our friends and people we whose work we appreciated, and then of course to have a launch where we could get bands to play music and have a party. And so this is my first opportunity to edit a magazine since I'd say like maybe 2009, which is nice. It was a good experience.
Well, I wanted to actually, I know that folks are going to be able to see the issue, obviously, but maybe you could walk us through the issue a little bit and, tell us about the different contributors and how, the conversations, like how everyone's contributing to the overall theme and conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Each piece is a very kind of like, I don't know, like comes out of a particular experience that I've had, or a connection that I've had with someone who's contributing. And I don't know where to start. I guess I'll start by saying that like with the interview, actually with Kay Slater, interviewing Q Lawrence. So this was a piece about the anti-MAID legislation, so that passed this legislation for medical assistance in dying, where the guidelines were broadened. So anyone with a disability diagnosis could qualify for or be recommended medical assistance in dying to sort of help alleviate their condition or provide them relief. So this was a really kind of devastating, I think, for many people. But there was just this amazing kind of moment of solidarity and kind of this movement in opposition to this bill, instigated by Catherine Frazee and Gabrielle Peters and their co-conspirators, including Q Lawrence, and who is based in BC. And who was really working the behind the scenes kind of like hosting of the virtual space. And they ran this this live stream, which was like a digital, like a filibuster, a disability filibuster in opposition to Bill C7, the Medical Assistance in Dying Act. And so Kay Slater interviews Q about that process, and in not only like organizing that space and what it meant to provide access, for attendees for these like long 24-hour long streams. But also what this moment meant in terms of like this consciousness around and awareness within our community of sort of the harm of the medical system, and how this legislation was its threat to people in the disability community. So one of the main instigators, Gabrielle Peters, who's a BC resident as well, really Gabrielle's experience was centered a lot in this in this movement, and she has a site called Dignity Denied, and really was sharing her own experience as someone who's poor on income assistance, a person with a disability, and how this legislation threatened her life. And really just was open about medical ableism. And at a point in time, so after the bill passed, there was this stream that went, they did, called the Disability Filibuster 2.0, and it's still available on online, and I'd recommend anyone check it out. It's at disabilityfilibuster.ca. And there was a statement by Gabrielle read on that stream, the 2.0 stream, and it was just this. She was basically expressing that the medical system is harmful to us as disabled people, and it wants to erase us, and it wants to, end our lives as a way to provide care, I guess, or some compassion to us, it was just such a backwards idea. And I really resonated with that idea that the medical system is harmful. I've lived with a complex chronic and episodic pain condition since childhood, and I've spent a lot of time in hospital, and I still do. And I hold a lot of medical trauma from those experiences. And and it wasn't until I found disability community and was connecting with other people who identified, as sick or chronically ill or disabled, that I was really able to, connect with my own, or even realize that I had so much fear of the medical system, and I've stayed away at times for years. For 2.5 years, there was a period of time where I wouldn't go to the hospital even when I was in an emergency situation. And I have a condition that could easily land me in intensive care and cause like damage to my organs and bones as well. And I have like quite some complications from that as well. But it wasn't until like I met other disabled people in these disability-led spaces, many of which are dedicated to the principles of disability justice, that I was able to recognize that trauma in myself, and how that just being relying on medical services and those power dynamics within that space, and how the medical model of disability is imprinted on all of our institutions, and so I think the filibuster actually was this moment where these people were recognizing that there's like a lot of us disabled people around, and we really need to take our care into our own hands. And this is at the time of the pandemic, where there's triaging, where certain people are being prioritized within ICU, and certain people aren't. This I think unequally impacts the people with disabilities, who are I think the most vulnerable at this time. And so the filibuster was really this time of just finding a sense of just I think it was really moving for me, because I recognized that a lot of people were feeling isolated, and then feeling this connection through that moment. And it was actually empowering for me. And I've actually made connections with people since that, both around this anti-MAID issue, but also just around, our various organizing and advocacy. And I think one thing that I mean, a lot of the issues dedicated to this interview, but I think it gets at, there's other pieces in the issue too, like the pages from Vo's a Trauma X graphic novel. So Vo is a fiber artist from Oregon, and who has this practice, of educating around the principles of trauma-informed care and disability justice. And I just think Vo's work really helped me understand, what I was, what my own trauma and how it manifests in my life, but also how I've been trying to describe accessibility that goes beyond compliance level measures for a long time. And I think hearing Vo's approach to disability justice through trauma-informed care really just gave me this great, really advanced my thinking, I guess, in terms of the ways I was thinking about accessibility as being something that we can achieve through relationships, and that really isn't something that happens through policy or legislation, through compliance. But then there's lots of beautiful writing too, creative writing in the piece, by poem by friends Cecily Nicholson and Mercedes Ng, about their time working on a farm called Emma's Acres here in BC, which is where they worked through the pandemic, and I think are still spending time there. And it's a farm where people who are formerly incarcerated work. And so they talk about the restorative nature of just spending time in that space with other people. And then, sorry, I've been rambling on here. Amanda, do you want to
That's
jump
okay.
in?
No, it's great. It's great for folks to get some insight into what they can expect. But what I wanted to say, like when you were making your various comments, is that I think that it's really important work that you're doing with your colleagues in the issue and in your exhibition too, in that maybe folks will feel less inhibited to share their own personal stories with medical ableism, and talking about trauma-informed care. And so maybe that's one of the goals of the issue and your exhibition, is to be able to make space for those narratives and those stories. So I guess I was kind of curious if you had any other motivating factors. And I think it is a mode of activism too, in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to expand people's perceptions of what accessibility can be. Like that's what I've tried to do with my work since I started making work, in 2009. I'll describe one of my performances that I think really gets at what I mean. And so I actually, I don't call myself, I don't use words like blind or visually impaired to describe myself, because I think those terms privilege visual experience. So I call myself a non-visual artist. I use a detection cane, but I don't use the typical white and red cane, like the typical white cane. It's a graphite cane that I use that I peeled all the tape off of. So it's black with a wooden handle. And so ever since I adopted a cane, I've modified it. And it's because I'm not in alignment with the institution that provided me the cane. I started this series of performances where I replace my cane with different things that I can use to navigate the city or unfamiliar spaces. And in one of my performances, a mobility device, I replaced my cane with a marching band. And then the marching band serves as my navigation system in an unfamiliar place. So I'm really, instead of using this institutional signifier, I'm making an agreement with a group of people that are supporting me around my terms. And, that's something that I've lacked, I think, in the in medicalizing settings. Like I have only I found agency, I think, in community with other disabled people to be able to self-define and reclaim the sense of self, the way that I understand myself. And so, I think I've had to be an advocate for myself since I was young, since, the first time experienced the failures of the medical system. And it's through our practice that I've been able to build, these frameworks where I can, propose something beyond, the three predetermined options that you're often, you provided. And for me, like in the museum context, that's usually like a maybe an audio tour that was recorded in the 70s that sounds really bad, or a touch tour where I can touch things that are, referring to things that are meant to be seen, that you can't touch. And these are kind of like, these are the conventions of museum accessibility. And I really think of those as a container for our participation as disabled people. They really frame the way that we are understood in relation to the museum. So, I think, we're mostly, as disabled people, understood as attendees. Maybe if there is an accessible offering that we want and we actually are interested and we can show up, but we aren't often understood as present. We don't have the opportunity. We're super underrepresented within cultural institutions. Disabled people are, and and I think so. I think if you look at the the container for our participation just is, yeah, it was one that was created largely by non-disabled people, sometimes in the service of people with disabilities, but without their consultation. And it hasn't really strayed too far from that since the beginning of education departments. So like or education programs or initiatives. And so, yeah, I really want to just talk about accessibility as we do within disability community and disability culture as something that is dynamic and something that, you know, grows from the grassroots and isn't imposed from the top down. It's in a community. It's a community agreement that evolves over time, and I think that is what we should be trying to achieve. And I think we should, as disabled people, we need to be reclaiming that space of accessibility and defining it around our terms. And you know, I think the strict guidelines and maybe the like the narrow set of guidelines for accessibility, there, you know, this is an imprint of the medical system. You know, this institution that where we are, you know, they give us our diagnoses and like they, you know, give us this path to follow, and you know, there are penalties in, you know, if you don't follow that path. And I think it works very similarly, you know, within that the way that we advance within other institutions, very similar as disabled people. So I really think now, you know, since the pandemic and the uprising for Black lives, that like disability justice is actually this great framework to help us, to guide us in the ways that we can actually like crip the museum and these spaces and radically re-envision them around our demands and desires. And while, you know, centering I think folks who are the most marginalized among us.
Yeah, actually can comment, I think for clarification, maybe it would be good to explain for folks at home, maybe the differences between disability rights and disability justice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so disability rights, you know, that's a form organizing the history that led to, you know, things like the Americans with Disabilities Act, and you know, where people were just fighting for this legislation that would provide them like some kind of you know, access, freedoms, you know, rights. But I think disability justice is a departure from rights-based organizing, and it recognizes that some people, especially people who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color, have you know, a little political power. So you know, these systems to make change and to you know, inform legislation are that you know, they don't have representation within those processes, and they can't you know, affect change in that way. So disability justice emerged out of the you know, it was a collective named Sins Invalid in 2005, involving, you know, people like Patty Byrne, Stacey Milburn, Mia Mingus, Leroy Moore, Alice Wong, these people who really kind of were instrumental to putting forward a new set of guidelines, and this set of guidelines that kind of recognizes that forms of oppression like, you know, racism, sexism, queer and transphobia, colonialism, they're all intertwined with and reinforce ableism. So I think, you know, and I think it was the aim of disability justice is to really build capacity for care that, you know, people lack, on account of like this governmental failure and medical ableism and policing as well. It's about building that capacity so we don't have to rely on the state, which is, you know, or carceral, these carceral systems, and we can build safety and capacity for care within our own communities, where the knowledge around what people need and how to provide it to them exists. And I think disability justice is just, it needs to be our new standard for how we think about accessibility, and how we understand the lives of people who are disabled. And it centers BIPOC disability experiences. It's about cross movement solidarity and interdependence. And one of the lines in the open access statement that I wrote in 2015 is, interdependence is central to the radical restructuring of power. These ideas are alive in the principles of disability justice. So I really have been, revisiting those principles since the pandemic, and also, the principles of trauma-informed care as well, which I think, have been really instructive at this time for me and many people.
That's great. Thanks for clarifying that, Carmen. I did also want to just expand on, the interview that you and I had, and that's published in the issue. There was a question that I had asked you, and you've mentioned it a few times now as well in our conversation today, but about, you and I have known each other for 10 years now. And I feel as though, in the beginning, like 10 years back, we didn't have the kind of disability community, arts community that we have now. And I've just seen such a huge shift and change and evolution of disability arts. And I guess I just wanted to have you elaborate a little bit on how you think that's evolved. It just feels, to me at least, so much more active. Like there's just more producers, there's more artists out there making work, and who are seemingly very bold and very unashamed and very proud to be able to express their traumas, their issues with the medical system, their institutional critique. There's just so much really great work happening, and I feel like it was more stigmatized 10 years ago. As as a curator, I had artists that were afraid of using the D word, disability, or who didn't want to be boxed into certain categories. And now that seems like that's really, really changing a lot. So I was wondering what your thoughts were on that.
Well, I think it's because of the work of, people dedicated to disability justice as it was introduced by its originators, so it's about the fact that we have these places where we can go, where our experiences can be affirmed, and we can meet other people who are approaching accessibility on their terms and care on their terms, and where like we, back when we met, and I have to say, like you introduced me to some of my closest friends and mentors within the disability movement. And, when I didn't really understand what my connection to that group was at the time, I had only read about some of these people, and, I really didn't have like connections within disability arts community until 2010, in Portland, when I was there studying art and social practice. And then it really kind of, it was a huge moment for me when I met you, Amanda, because you kind of helped connect me to this critical discourse and this like lineage of activism that and art that my work was connected to, and I could understand myself that way. But at the time, I remember this frustration with, like, why aren't we receiving recognition for this work? Or I've had many terrible experiences with art institutions, like from back then, and I was still learning how to advocate for myself within those within those exchanges with these institutions. But yeah, like back then, I was trying to figure out, like, how do you break through the wall? Like I was always entering the institution from the education department, which was great, and many of the opportunities I got were because, you know, someone in that was maybe an access coordinator had heard about my work and, you know, wanted to bring me in to you know, as part of their educational program, but I was able to do these performances too. But I really was I really felt like that wall between education and curatorial at the time. And, you know, I think things have changed now. And I think my sense is now is that like a lot of institutions want to work with disabled artists, but, you know, the question is, can they host them? And do artists actually feel welcome? And like they're the folks who are hosting them, can they care for them and support them, you know, in the ways that they need to be supported? Do they understand disability as you know, a political identity? Do they understand what ableism is? And so I think for artists now, you know, we have so many online spaces where we can gather, we can be affirmed in our experiences. You know, something like Alice Wong's Disability Visibility site, you know, that's a place where, you know, I mean, just if I can go to a site and like the images are described in the descriptions hold equal weight to the visual material, that for me, there's like the less labor of translation, and I feel welcome. And so, you know, we have more of these spaces where we can go to be supported, and where people can say, hey, I resonate with what you're saying about institutions, and we can connect and make work. And you know, I think still like there's this inequality when it comes to like the access that we have to these platforms, these cultural platforms. And I actually don't think many are like even able to host us meaningfully, and or have that capacity to even host a show, say about like a survey exhibition about disability art or disability activism. These things, I think, you know, require disabled artists, curators, cultural workers, you know, to be centered and to be invited in, and for the institutions to dedicate time, space, and resources to disability art, and and for us to like be supported in our world building, because you know, I just think our participation has been so limited within these spaces, and now people are just finding each other and being like, we might not, you know, it's like what I was talking about with disability justice. We might not need the institutions. They probably need us more than we need them.
I like that very much. I agree with you. And I will say that I think, you know, you've also mentioned the pandemic, that how the pandemic has you know, disproportionately affected disabled folks, but also how the pandemic has forced everyone to become disabled in some way, using Joseph Grigley's words. And now that everyone's finding, like, reaping the benefits of online access, and I guess the question remains, will this continue when things sort of return to face-to-face reality, and what, you know, how will things shift for disabled folks? So I guess we'll have to wait and see. But we do want to wrap up because we want to make time for questions and answers. So we will turn it over to all of you out there so that Carmen and I welcome your questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to Carmen and Amanda for this incredible, candid, and informative conversation. Thank you to Nicole for your lovely words at the beginning. And I just wanted to give a quick thank you to Dean and Scott and the collective broadcast team for making this event possible. And now we'll go into the Q&A. And also just a reminder for those joining us tonight, please submit your questions through the chat box. But we already have a couple of questions ready. First of all, what were some of the points of unlearning that you, Carmen, would feel comfortable sharing in your work with the Mackenzie and on this project with BlackFlash?
Well, I think, there's always a degree of unlearning when it comes to addressing accessibility in the museum when there's not that disability justice focus or common reference. So, I think, over the years that I've been working with the Mackenzie, I've been able to share some of the work of my peers, and, this, I think, just really gives you a fuller understanding of, yeah, what what a body can be, but then what accessibility can be as well as a result. And so yeah, we spent a lot of time looking at texts like the principles of disability justice. This text by Elwood Jimmy and Vanessa Andreotti called Bricks and Threads is about from this book, their book Towards Braiding, which is about Indigenous and colonial organizing strategies. We looked at the ideas of cripping and dwelling with disability, an idea, a piece by Eliza Chandler on those topics, and also, ideas by pieces by Nick Walker on neuroqueering and neurocosmopolitanism as well. So really thinking of disability and disability experience as a point of departure, and and maybe revealing the the radical possibilities of what as Eliza Chandler says, dwelling with disability. And I think that's a very different paradigm than the usual kind of accessible, offering, which is kind of like this way to retrofit accessibility. It's like a temporary bridge to participation in a system that wasn't built with the recipient in mind. So it's not about really assimilating disability or reducing. It's actually about, because usually this, I would say most accessibility programs, the idea is that it will help you reintegrate into a dominant culture that is not disabled. I think this is a new idea for people, especially when we have one department in the museum that is kind of dedicated to accessibility. To understand accessibility is something that is about, everybody. It's a shared commitment across departments and levels of management. It requires disability culture to be centered, and that's a radical, I think, transformation of the institution when we start to do that, and we start to re-envision the institution, the museum, around the demands and desires of the disabled body.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Carmen. I have another question quickly too. They were wondering if Carmen could talk a little bit more on the project, more on his marching band navigation device project.
Yeah, for sure. So so this project, it emerged in 2013 when I was living in Portland at the time, and I was talking to my best friend Rizal Medina, who we always would joke and have these funny conversations, and we just started talking one day about the things that I could replace my cane with, and landed on this idea of replacing my cane with a marching band. And so months later, I met John Spiak at the Grand Central Arts Center in Santa Ana, California, and I told him about this conversation. And I think it was a week later that he emailed me and said, okay, well, I have 5 marching bands for you to talk to that want to work with you. And I was like, okay, this is going to happen. And so I met these bands, and I really, we had a great conversation with this band from the Great Centurion Marching Band from Century High School in Santa Ana. And this was my first performance of mobility device through the Grand Central Arts Center in 2013. And then, yeah, since then, I performed it on the High Line in 2019 with the Hungry March Band, which they kind of advertise themselves as like, we play any gig. So I was like, how about this gig? And then I went to New York to practice with them over a couple of years. And we would just meet in this rehearsal space in Williamsburg and just kind of go through these various scenarios of like what I might encounter when I'm on a walk. And then develop these kind of, protocols for how to address things in these various scenarios. So we practice in a rehearsal space, and then we brought the operation outside and into the surrounding neighborhood, and until we kind of could work as a single organism. And yeah, that's kind of, and I'm actually have plans to perform Mobility Device in Vancouver in I think it's like the week after Labor Day, and it's with the Carnival Band here in Vancouver, which plays out of and rehearses in a seniors lounge at Britannia Community Center here in East Van. So yeah, and it's a super fun project. It's like, I love walking with the marching band, yeah, it's kind of, I would say, one of my projects that I think really embodies the principles of open access as I describe them, is Mobility Device, where I'm making an agreement with this group of people, and accessibility is this just exchange that evolves based on the situation. And yeah, the roles are really fluid too. Like I remember rehearsing actually on the High Line the day before our actual performance, and the tuba player actually like missed a step, and I almost like tripped down a few stairs, and the tuba player stopped playing and grabbed me. And I think that's exactly what this project is about. Like you're making this negotiation, like that's my support network. And at that point, the musician knew that he could help me if he reached out and grabbed me, and I actually really appreciated that. And it's not like someone I didn't know. Like I had this intimacy with that group, and I was vulnerable with them around my own access needs, and we got to know each other over years, and yeah, and so I thought that was a very caring gesture, actually. And I don't want to be grabbed by anybody, like just when I'm I actually find it really annoying when people want to offer help that I don't need. But in that context, I was lending my care to this group. So yeah, it ended up working quite well.
Great. Okay, so I'm just going to continue asking you questions if you don't mind, Amanda and Carmen. Okay, so I have one from another one, and it says, "Hi, Amanda and Carm, thank you for being here. I'd love to hear from you both about your thoughts on how we move away from thinking in monoliths, us versus them, white disabled folks not being culpable, latching onto institutions, and cultivate interpersonal disability justice. How do you approach being accountable to the people you work with everything happening in Canada right now?" It's a great question.
Amanda, do you want to respond first? Because I feel like I've been talking a lot.
So sure, I'm happy to do that. But I want to say that acknowledge that I am aware of what's been happening in Canada with the residential schools, and it's devastating. And but I can't speak from a position of working within that context because I'm here in California. But I have spent time living and working in Saskatchewan, so I am sort of familiar with some of the issues happening over there. But in the meantime, just in terms of my entire practice as a curator and art historian is trying to talk to institutions and rethink art through a disability lens. And so often when I'm actually invited to these days I've been invited to speak to staff in museums quite frequently, and they all want to know, you know, how they can bring in a creative, what I like to call creative access approach. So that idea, that's one of the books that Nicole mentioned that I'm working on. The idea of that is to simply think of access less as a chore or as like some kind of legal mandate, and think of it more creatively. And that's how I would answer your question, because you can work within institutions like collaboratively, where you're thinking of access as a more stimulating and creative process rather than something kind of boring. Like some people have said, we lack the money for that, so let's just dismiss it. And obviously Carmen has developed like a really complex and really thoughtful way of thinking about access as well within his own practice and in his own methods of consultation with institutions. Within my book, I've actually started working on reading through the chapters submissions, which are really so great. And a lot of people are sort of saying that unfortunately museums have a very ableist like medical model approach to access, as in, oh, we have to provide audio description in order to fix the problem of not being able to access the material visually. So maybe we need to think of like moving away from that medical model within museums and think of creative access, but also how, you know, maybe having a lack of vision or a lack of hearing actually provides generative new avenues to explore art. And what are they? So I'm really excited by those possibilities. But I think, you know, having what Carmen has done with the Mackenzie as like in this work of consultation over the last 4 years, I think that's also the answer to your question, so that it has to be a long-term relationship so that the museum really has time. Museums need time. They need time to learn and to grow and to build trusting relationships with community so that they can change over time. So artists are a lot faster at adapting than museums are. So I hope that's a helpful response to the question.
And in a community context too, like I think this is why disability justice is a great a guide for this kind of work that needs to happen right now. It really is about embracing the intersections of experience. So like we're not just disabled, we're disabled and, you know, whatever other identity position you hold. And I think, you know, disability justice too, like it prioritizes you know, BIPOC disability experiences. And I think, you know, we can't not do that right now. And we can't not center Black and Indigenous people of color who are disabled in this work around accessibility. And I say, you know, like I think about these days, I'm thinking about how do we set a new cultural standard for accessibility? You know, and I'm usually talking to institutions about this, about like how does a museum set a new, you know, how do they adopt a new cultural standard or meet a cultural standard for accessibility? But I think these cultural standards already exist in disability-led spaces, especially spaces dedicated to disability justice. And there are a few of them. Like, I mean, I think like what Amanda was asking me earlier to distinguish disability justice from disability rights, it's because disability justice is misused a lot just to mean, you know, any sort of disability rights or effort towards rights or advocacy or whatever, but it really is a specific thing. And, you know, I would point to organizations like the Disability Justice Network of Ontario, great organization who, you know, I think is enlivening the principles of disability justice with their work. And also the Portland Disability Justice Collective as well. And you know, Sins Invalid, and of course, and the Disability Justice Culture Club as well. And these spaces that you know, are led by disabled people who are Black and Indigenous and people of color and people who are queer as well. And this is, the way that we are going to be able to re-envision this space and like actually provide accessibility that is justice oriented and that is creative is going to only happen if we're like holding these spaces together, in community with other people, and if we don't have relationships with them, like the decision making is going to happen without them. And so we do have to hold good relationships with people who who have a limited access to these conversations of what accessibility is. And the museum, these resources that we have, these cultural platforms, like they need to include us in decision making, and on their boards, as curators. Like some museums don't even have, like the offices are not accessible, like the production studios aren't accessible. Like it really shows you like how the non-disabled or wider culture really what they imagined for us as disabled people. Some museums still don't have access programs, or access coordinator. So I think this, we really have to I think really highlight our own cultural protocols when it comes to accessibility, the ones that we make, those agreements we make with other disabled people. Because if folks aren't familiar with the open access tenants, there's a version of it online and you can look it up. But anyways, I really talk about accessibility as a temporary, collectively held space, and that's the title of the issue. It's I don't think of accessibility as like, I don't believe in universal accessibility. I don't think we can be accessible to everyone all the time. That requires an agreement. It requires people in relationship with each other. And and accessibility is fragile. It's just like safe space, like you can't assume a safe place, a space is safe. That has to be, you have to define what safety means. You have to like share that definition with a group of people who are helping enliven that definition.
Thank you so much for that, Carmen. And Amanda, thank you so much for a great answer. I have another question. Hi, Carmen, can you talk about your magnificent ramp? Climbing it certainly created a full body experience, and I'm curious to hear more about how you imagine the experience or what you hope viewers might feel. So it's an interesting segue between the two questions.
Yeah. So the ramp, this ramp, like this installation was, I co-developed this with Michael Liss of Good Weather and Associates, who's a designer that I've been working with for a few years now, who's also involved in my show at the Banff Center with Heather Kai-Smith into 2019. And like everything in the show is a provisional structure, I would say. The ramp is meant to feel like it's made of scaffolding. It's precarious. It's this maybe a framework, something that is maybe being like I think about accessibility this way with institutions. Like it might be like something is coming into being, but whether it's going to be effective or not is yet to be seen. So I think it gets to at this idea of accessibility being fragile. And so when you're walking up the ramp, I do want people, or strolling up the ramp, however you are experiencing it, feeling your way through the installation, I want people to like feel that that space in their body, and really and for it to be a bit sort of like unclear as to whether it's, like it's scaffolding, like it feels a little wobbly, it's there's this like big dome floating from the ceiling. There's these sandbags that kind of reference disaster relief, where you can sit. And and yeah, I think, you know, I trust in the Mackenzie in the ways that I've been discussing accessibility with them, and how I know they're you know, kind of practicing accessibility and have been, and even before I started working with them. But you know, this installation is kind of like pointing to the situation where, you know, like I don't know what's going to happen next at the institution, and it really is about them turning that scaffolding into something you know, something solid, you know, something that can reflect the needs of the community at any given time. Maybe this scaffolding needs to be torn down. You know, maybe it needs to take a different form. And I think that's for, you know, like, I hope to continue to be in conversation with the Mackenzie, but I think it really now is about them, yeah, like holding their relationships with community, and you know, some of which have you know, they've been in consultation with certain folks even before I started working with them. So I hope those relationships deepen and these commitments deepen too.
That's great. We have another question that kind of plays on the question before the last one, but it's for Amanda. Considering the diversity and different levels of accessibility needs and disabilities, how could a curator, programmer, facilitator ensure that their work would be responsible, or is it even possible to be everything for everyone? So that's kind of a little bit like what Carmen finished saying a few minutes ago.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's not possible to be everything for everyone. So, you know, I've approached it a number of different ways. Like when I've curated my practice has been exclusively dedicated to disability related themes for the last 10 years. And I, you know, depending on the topic of the exhibition, I think about delivering certain modes of access more specifically to certain audiences. Other times I will try and cater to as many different disabilities as possible in my programming. And then I will always be surprised and floored when somebody comes in and says, but what about this? You missed this for my son, or I can't access this, or this work is triggering me in some way that I would never have anticipated. So it's really, really hard. I think that if you gesture towards you know, the audiences that you think will benefit from your exhibit and that you know will be present, like it's a lot of collaboration with your institution. As a freelancer, I have to just talk to my institution and ask them what kinds of audiences that they have. So I'm being specific to that particular community. I think that that's like the first step, and then to the artists that I'm working with, so that the artists feel comfortable in the space and comfortable in the way that they communicate with the community. That's important. And then also to be responsive and open when your audience comes in and asks questions and asks if they can have a certain accommodation, and then you can try and meet that need. So I've tried to do all of those things. Sometimes I'm limited because there's certain restrictions on like tactility, like touching works in the exhibition. That's one of my favorite things to do. And that's really hard to achieve. So it's a lot of conversations with the artists to see, well, what can we do so that we can grant access to tactility in some kind of way? That's the answer to the question. It's just an ongoing conversation with your artists, with your institution, and with your community.
Thank you so much, Amanda. That was really great. I appreciate that a lot. And I guess I just have one more question for Amanda. When is your book coming out?
Yeah, well, hopefully the end of 2022. There's 25 chapters in the book. Carmen is actually one of the contributors. So you'll be able to read a contribution from Carmen, which is really nice. And there's people contributing from all over the world. So we have people in Europe, here in Canada, here in California, and across the United States, Australia, Asia. So I'm really, really excited to hear all of these contributions, because they're providing best practice like templates for creative access. And they're all talking about examples of, like, whether from a museum, like an institutional perspective, or from an artist perspective. So you'll hear, very different voices being represented in the book, which is really exciting.
Awesome. Well, congratulations. And I can't wait to get my hands on it later.
Sure. Yeah, it's coming out in print, but it will also be an ebook.
Oh, great. Awesome.
It's going to be more accessible for some folks.
So I guess we're all out of questions, but I did want to take just another quick moment to thank Carmen and Amanda for joining us tonight for this awesome conversation. I really appreciate your candor and sharing your knowledge and personal experiences. Thank you so much to Nicole. It's been such a pleasure working on this project with you and the Mackenzie. I wanted to thank all of the contributors of the issue for their patience with BlackFlash and the BlackFlash team through the creation of this project, and all of their incredible contributions. And also thank you to Dean, our interpreter, and Scott from Collective Broadcast for all their help tonight. The issue is currently available in pre-order. We're going to be going to print hopefully by the end of this week. And I'm very, very excited. And so you can order it now, and then it will be emailed, the PDF and the print issue will be emailed and sent out to you as soon as it's ready to go. And you can, if you are able to visit the Mackenzie, I hope everyone checks out Carmen's incredible exhibition. Thank you, everyone. Does anyone have any final words or anything they would like to plug before we close up for tonight?
I just want to say thank you. Thanks, everybody. And so many people were important to this issue and making it happen in exhibition, and it wouldn't have happened without you. And all the access workers and all the labor put towards accessibility, the effort and intention. I just wanted to acknowledge that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Have a wonderful night, everybody. Take care. Be safe. Thank you.
Bye.